It was the summer of 2018 when a group of 5 college friends decided to embark on a road trip that would later haunt them for years. Mark, Sarah, Julia, Ethan, and Ben had planned the journey as a way to escape their hectic schedules. Their destination was a remote, forested area in the Pacific Northwest, known for its breathtaking scenery and the eerie legends that locals whispered about. The group arrived at their rental cabin just before sunset. The cabin was rustic but charming, nestled deep in the woods. The owner, an elderly man with piercing blue eyes, handed them the keys but not without a warning. "Stay indoors after dark," he said, his voice low and serious. "The forest comes alive at night." They laughed it off, thinking it was just a local trying to spook city folks. The first night passed uneventfully. They spent it around a campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. But as the sun dipped below the horizon on the second night, an unsettling atmosphere began to settle over the forest. The chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves that had accompanied their first evening vanished, leaving an oppressive silence. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes darting toward the dark tree line. "Hear what?" Ethan asked. "Exactly," she replied. "Nothing. It's too quiet." The group brushed it off and went to bed, but Mark couldn't sleep. Around midnight, he heard faint whispers outside his window. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the voices grew clearer, more distinct. They weren't speaking English, or any language he could recognize. Against his better judgment, Mark pulled back the curtain. His breath caught in his throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a figure cloaked in shadows. Its form was humanoid but unnaturally tall and thin, its eyes glowing a dim, unnatural yellow. Mark froze, paralyzed by fear, as the figure raised a bony hand and pointed directly at him. The next morning, Mark told the others what he'd seen. Ben laughed it off, saying he'd probably just been dreaming. But Sarah and Julia looked uneasy. "I felt like someone was watching me last night," Julia admitted. "I thought I was just imagining things." Determined not to let paranoia ruin their trip, they decided to hike to a nearby lake. The trail was overgrown and poorly marked, but they eventually found their way to the water. The lake was pristine, its surface like glass, reflecting the surrounding trees. For a while, they forgot about the strange events of the night before. Then they found the footprints. Large, clawed imprints circled the edge of the lake, too big to belong to any animal they could think of. They trailed off into the woods, disappearing among the underbrush. The group decided to head back, their earlier excitement replaced by a growing sense of unease. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time, and accompanied by faint tapping on the cabin walls. Ethan, the skeptic of the group, decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, he stepped outside while the others watched nervously from the window. He disappeared into the darkness. Minutes passed, then an hour. Panic set in as they called out his name, their voices echoing through the silent forest. Finally, Ethan stumbled back into the cabin, pale and trembling. "It's real," he stammered. "There's something out there." He refused to say more, retreating to his room and locking the door. The rest of the group sat together in the living room, too scared to sleep. The whispers grew louder, closer, until they seemed to be coming from inside the cabin itself. At dawn, they packed their things and fled, leaving the cabin and its eerie secrets behind. But the horror didn't end there. Over the following weeks, each of them reported strange occurrences, shadows moving in the corners of their vision, unexplainable noises in their homes, and vivid nightmares of glowing yellow eyes watching them from the darkness. Months passed, and the friends' lives unraveled. Mark, once the group's fearless leader, began to withdraw, plagued by sleepless nights and paranoia. Sarah's health deteriorated as she suffered from unexplained migraines and vivid hallucinations. Julia became obsessed with researching the area, poring over old records and legends in a desperate attempt to find answers. She discovered stories of an ancient being, known only as the Watcher, said to haunt the forest and mark those who dared to enter its domain. One by one, the group members experienced encounters that defied explanation. Ben's car veered off the road one night, narrowly avoiding a fatal crash, but he swore he'd seen the glowing yellow eyes in his rearview mirror. Ethan's nightmares escalated to the point where he refused to sleep, his mental state unraveling as he mumbled incoherent warnings about their return. Desperate for closure, the group decided to reunite and confront their fears. They returned to the cabin the following summer, armed with cameras, recording equipment, and a determination to uncover the truth. The owner was gone, and the cabin had been abandoned, its windows shattered and its walls covered in strange symbols. The air felt heavier, charged with an unnatural energy that made their skin crawl. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds, whispers, footsteps, and the occasional snap of a branch. The group huddled together, their equipment recording every chilling detail. Then, just after midnight, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. The cabin door creaked open, though no one was near it. A figure emerged from the darkness, its form even more grotesque than Mark had described. Its limbs were impossibly long, its skin a sickly gray that seemed to absorb the moonlight. Its glowing eyes pierced through the group, paralyzing them with fear. It spoke, its voice a guttural blend of whispers and growls, but its words were incomprehensible. The cameras malfunctioned, their screens flickering before going dark. The group fled into the night, abandoning their belongings and running blindly through the forest. By dawn, they found themselves on the edge of the highway, bruised, bloodied, and terrified. They flagged down a passing car and left the area for good. The footage they recovered from the cameras was distorted, filled with static and brief, horrifying glimpses of the creature. Experts they consulted dismissed it as a hoax or technical malfunction, but the group knew better. They'd seen the truth, and they'd been marked. To this day, the group rarely speaks of their experience. They've scattered across the country, trying to rebuild their lives, but the memories linger. Late at night, when the world is quiet, they're reminded of the forest and the horrors that dwell within it. And sometimes, just sometimes, they see the yellow eyes watching them from the shadows.